Hello everybody, welcome back to Screenstars and welcome to another PlayStation review. Today's review is for Saints Row on the PlayStation 5. Wow, this one has been getting a rough ride, certainly from reviewers. Saints Row then, right, what is my relationship to this series? Well, essentially I have played all the Saints Row games. Most prominently is Saints Row 3 and Saints Row 4. They did a remaster of Saints Row 3. Was that last year? Something like that I really quite enjoyed and I reviewed on the channel. And I've always got a bit of a soft spot for Saints Row 4, even though it gets a bit bonkers, that game. Saints Row 1 and 2 I did play, but not necessarily prominently. So I wouldn't describe myself as a Saints Row fanboy or anything like that. I'm going into this game quite relaxed. It's not a game that I've been incredibly overhyped to play or anything like that. I did see some of the early gameplay when it was released. Was it last year or a year before? Something like that. And everybody went mad and kicked off because it looked like they were going very politically correct and all this kind of stuff. Well, I've had my hands on this game now for a number of days and I've wanted to take my time with this review rather than try and rush a review out or something like that. I've really tried to put a lot of time into this game to get you the most in-depth review that I can. Because this game has been getting a rough ride, and some of it I think is warranted, and some of it not necessarily so, I don't think. Now, the first thing I will say is, if you are a fan of the Saints Row games, the game itself will feel very familiar in the way it looks, in the way it feels, and some of the humour involved, and all that kind of stuff. Maybe not to the quality and standard of some of the other games, certainly in regards to the writing anyway. But from my perspective, the look and feel of the game is almost like a weird cross between Watch Dogs 2 and, you know, the other Saints Row games, certainly Saints Row 3 and 4 anyway. Saints Row 3, the remastered version especially. Whereas this game certainly does not look and feel next-gen by any stretch of the imagination, it is not horrifically bad either, I don't think, in the way it looks. Now, it's got more of a cartoon aesthetic than a realistic approach like some other, open world games, you know, like the Watch Dog games, Watch Dog Legion certainly, and GTA 5 and all that kind of stuff. It's got a simpler, more cartoony aesthetic to the game, but I think it is in keeping with previous Saints Row games, even though it has been getting a lot of criticism. Now, that's not to say that the graphics are outstanding or anything, because I don't think they are. They're acceptable, but certainly I think some of the frame rates are really quite poor and the pop-ins are quite distracting, and the game will certainly require one or two more patches to make it certainly up to the standards of quite particular gamers out there. Now, I have mentioned before in my reviews for games that I'm quite a tolerant gamer. I'm at an age now where, you know, the odd glitch, the odd crash, the odd frame rate drop here and there doesn't necessarily bother me. It is quite noticeable at times in this game, but it's also worth noting that I personally haven't experienced any crashes playing this game on my PlayStation 5. I've had a couple of freezes in like the menu. There's like a telephone app that you can open up, very similar to GTA. And I've had a couple of freezes in that have caused me to restart the game, but the game has not glitched out and crashed on me. Also, other than the odd frame rate drop here and there and the pop-in and stuff, it's, to me, of a reasonable standard. But for you guys out there, just be warned, if you're really particular about that sort of thing, it's likely to frustrate you, I think. Now, what do we get with Saints Row then in regards to a story? Well, you can create and customize your character from scratch at the beginning, male or female, and you can make them as outlandish as you want. That's the character I chose with the cowboy hat on. That's the one I made. Quite happy with my character, actually, I'm not going to lie. The other characters in the game, essentially you are sharing a flat with 3 of your friends. And yeah, they're very, very forgettable, in my opinion. Very forgettable. In fact, I can only remember really the name of one of them, Eli. Oh, no, is it Eli, Kevin, and I forget the other one. They're just totally forgettable. And essentially you kind of all decide together to bring to build your own criminal empire, the Saints. So that's what you do. So the early part of the game is you kind of doing like missions for this security company, and then missions for your friends, and then ultimately you all decide to go out on your own. So you'll go off to this church and make that your base of operations, and then you'll go and do all these other side jobs to build up your reputation and your criminal enterprise. And that's essentially the game. Exactly what you would expect. Now, from my perspective playing the game, I think the majority of the story missions I've had quite a lot of fun with. Not all of them. I think some of them are really stupid and silly and dull. But a lot of them are actually quite fun, and it's almost like, you know, this big over-the-top action movie, some missions. I mean, completely over the top, but quite fun to play. So I think the main missions, for me anyway, were more enjoyable than any other thing in the game, because with this being an open world game and a Saints Row game, you get all the other side activities that you certainly could imagine. You know, you've got your insurance fraud, you've got dumpster diving, which is basically sticking your head in the dumpster, seeing if you can find treasures. You've got like photo hunts, you've got loads of different things that you can do in the open world. So to say that there's not enough to do in the open world is untrue. There's plenty to do. It's just not necessarily particularly engaging. It is worth mentioning as well, you can, as you can see here, you can download other people's character creations, very much like the WWE games, like, you know, the community creations. So people will download bosses and things like that. Upload bosses, and you can kind of download them if you want. There's all sorts, it's like John Wick and Walter White, all sorts of things, but it's also worth noting that you need to have like the right clothing options for you to download all of them, so on and so forth. There's the wingsuit, as you can see here as well, which is a nice distraction, but it just feels like a bit of an afterthought. To be honest, I've barely used it in the game. It seems like they thought, oh, just cause that's a fun game, we'll put a wingsuit in it. So there's lots of things they've kind of done with this game that kind of make it a bit odd. The fundamentals of the game are fairly sound. It's an open world that consists of you driving around and shooting things. Now, what's the driving like? It's fine. It ain't going to win any awards. It's not going to knock, you know, it's not going to knock Gran Turismo off its pedestal as, like, you know, a racing simulation. But it isn't meant to. This is always my argument with like open world games. You know, they are not driving simulators. So the driving feels fine, and nothing special. You've got like this slide maneuver that you can do, and you can drift. So you can kind of slide into other cars to blow them up, sort of thing, and you can drift around corners. It's over the top and arcadey, but it's fun. The shooting is okay, exactly as I remember the other Saints Row games feel, to be honest. The only thing I can't understand why they haven't included in the game is like a cover system. It desperately needs it, because you just feel like you're out in the open, and it just becomes like a mass gunfight with you out in the open for the most part. It just seems a little bit odd. You've got skills and perks that you can unlock, so you can kind of, you've seen all the videos of shoving grenades down people's pants and throwing them into people, and chucking bombs and grenades, and there's all sorts of different perks and things that you can unlock in the game if that is your bag. And the customizational options in the game are pretty good as well. As I've mentioned, you can customize your character any time in the game, in the app. You can change what you wear, or what he or she wears. You can also fully customize your weapons and the vehicles as well. Any vehicles that you've got in your garage, you can fully customize. And it is quite in-depth customization as well. If that's your sort of thing, you can do that as well. And you've got all your ventures out in the world that'll make you big bucks, sort of thing. So you can go in your app, and any money that you've earned from your ventures, you can just transfer into your bank account. So on and so forth. So it's pretty much exactly that. It is Saints Row. Is it the reboot that the franchise deserved? Probably not. Is it exactly what I kind of expected? Yeah. I didn't really expect anything more. I think the problem with this game is it feels quite old-fashioned. They haven't innovated at all. They've just created like a playground for you to play around in, and they've not innovated any of the mechanics at all. It feels like a game that could have existed 10 years ago quite easily, and probably it would have got fairly decent reviews at that time. I think these days, I think people are just expecting a little bit more, and Volition just haven't at all. I mean, what they've given us is Saints Row, but without the characters that we know and love, from the other games. Now, I think if they'd have given us memorable characters and a more memorable story, this game might have been a little bit more, or reviewers might have been a little bit more forgiving with this one, because it doesn't necessarily feels like a Saints Row game because you don't know any of the characters, and the characters they try and introduce into this franchise are basically dull as dishwater. So it is what it is, guys. It is a Saints Row game. It does have that DNA. There are moments where it gets really, really juvenile, and there are other moments where you'll have a little quiet chuckle to yourself without anyone seeing, sort of thing. But it's not horrifically bad or anything. These games very rarely are as bad as other people make out. My advice to you guys is it is definitely not worth full price in the state it's in right now. I think if they'd have released this at a £40 price tag rather than like a £60 price tag, I think people would have been more forgiving, and it feels more around that price tag as well. So my advice is to wait for a sale for this one till it drops to around £40, and then probably there'll be a few more patches added to it by then, and then it might certainly be worth playing. So I'm going to give this one a 7 out of 10. It's not the disaster that everyone's kind of making it out to be. If you like open world playgrounds, there are certainly worse ones out there. This is certainly, you are going to have a little bit of fun in this one. Just don't go into it thinking this is going to be like a masterpiece or anything like that. It's quite an old-fashioned game and quite an old-fashioned open world, which I can certainly see why this would disappoint some people. So I hope you'll enjoy this review. I hope you found it useful. Thank you very much for watching. And of course, I will be back with plenty more reviews and content on the channel very, very soon.